Welcome back for part 14. I might be speaking before my camera's actually rolling. Whatever. I am Shaggy Philalitea. I am less polished than I am compelled to speak the truth to you. Insofar as that's prophecy, then it's prophecy. We are in the midst of a dizzying array of metatext explaining the Gospel of John. We have not left chapter 1 yet for those who are new here. If you are new here, I am Shaggy. You can call me Shags. You can call me V. You can call me Vincent. Please don't call me Vinny, and I hate Vince. So, we've just left Matthew and Isaiah behind, looking for the Elijah, looking for good definitions of who the Elijah was, looking for good definitions of the prophet. We have not gone looking for the Christ. Would you like to go looking for the Christ? I'm going to open my index of terms here, and I'm going to see if we can find any Old Testament books about Christ. And if I'm unsatisfied with that, I'll also look from the side. Because they might be, meaningfully different. Well, check it out. Our mentions for Christ are from Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Colossians, and Hebrews. So the Christ is not mentioned in the Hebrew canon. Now that only makes sense. Christos is a Greek word. So let's do this. Because Christos is a Greek word which means anointed. Aha! Check it out. Leviticus 16. I'm leaving myself. Oops. This time I got up so that I can be a little bit more. I don't know where Leviticus is in this book. I think it's in the Torah. It is. It's book 3 of the Torah. So it's fairly early in this. Oop, I opened right to it. Check that out. Open right to Leviticus 16. If we were doing book oracle, and we're not doing book oracle, that means that God approves of this metatextual diversion. This is not a diversion. We are exploring the metatext, and we've just hit a passage where they've used 3 words, Christ, prophet, and Elijah, asking John the Baptist if he was any of those. In a book which is telling you outright, it's being, the author of the book is channeling the ghost of John the Baptist. So if John the Baptist has these words in his mind, in his mouth, in his ghost, and we can take it on faith that our author isn't blowing smoke up our ass, because his cult still existed, which means that his students still existed, which means that, as I've told you, the tablets of lecture notes would have still been floating around when John, the author, was channeling John the prophet. Now, you might know me well enough to know that I hate Jane Roberts. And part of why I hate Jane Roberts is because she's doing exactly what I'm telling you this author is doing with John the Baptist with William James. You might notice that my left eye began twitching right now. She fills me with very real rage. I'm going to take my glasses off so maybe you can see that more clearly. This is my left eye. When I get really upset, my left eye gets going. She makes me really upset. And the reason she makes me so upset is because she's lying. You can't reasonably channel someone whom you've never met. You understand there were rituals for this, and there were actually methods by which this was done, and you notice my Beelzebub friend is back, and there are 3 people in the dining room who all have food. It's called imagination. The Romans were very good at this. They had whole systems of magic in place for channeling dead ancestors and necromantic rituals to guide the family in the way that the patriarch frequently, but often they could be heroic members of the family, did. The idea was to quite literally inspire the current generation. That means people between ages 15 and 25. Inspire, in this case, when I say literally, what that means is exactly what the word means. Inspire means to put in a spirit. You understand? Imagination was a ritual. I'm going to look away from your eyes now. Imagination was a ritual where young members of a family, during family gatherings, particularly during holy rituals, festivals for holidays, they would wear the death mask of long dead, frequently long dead, family members whom they kind of resembled physically in their body type. If you don't know what a death mask is, this was a thing that the Romans really liked doing, where when you died on your deathbed, they would take a plaster cast of your face in death, the serenity of death, and then they would make bronze or gold or whatever molds of it. And then that mask would be in a cherished place in the house, an honored place where your face would quite often literally look over the family. I find it repellent because I find all of this imagistic magic repellent for what it's done to future generations. But we have to remember that by the time the New Testament is being written, Roman culture is the culture du jour in the Mediterranean. It's no longer Greek culture, is not the culture du jour. And so what this means is that the Roman nobility's interest in whatever magic rituals they are interested in, du jour means of the day. So of the day, of the time, and a day frequently just meant the years between whichever prominent generation was 15 to 25, right? So the day today just means young people. It means the people now between 15 and 25, their day. So, John the Baptist could very much be talking about imagistic magic like this. Not just could, is. Reincarnation is also image magic. It's inspiration. You don't have to actually have been that person in a previous life to have molded yourself after them so much that in the records of what you and how well you can know them and how perfectly they're remembered, you can just be the next version. Like, the iPhone 1 to the iPhone 2 didn't recall all of the iPhone 1s, turn them into iPhone 2s, and then send them back out and then begin selling only iPhone 2s. And so now we're back to talking about the CIA since the 1960s, or maybe even earlier than that, and their secret spy and secret messiah programs, and I don't want to talk about that. I want to see what the Torah of about 250 BC, Leviticus, chapter 16, has to say about the anointed one. And I told you in chapter 1, or part 1, I might call these chapters because this has become a book in its own right, and good it should. I can't write and publish that book, so let's just make the audio version, you understand? I said I wasn't going to read a lot of these chapter headers because they're spoilery, but this one is appropriate. The chapter header for Leviticus 16 is the Day of Atonement. The Lord spoke to Moses after the death of the two sons of Aaron, when they drew near before the Lord and died. And the Lord said to Moses, "Tell Aaron your brother not to come at any time into the holy place inside the veil, before the mercy seat that is on the ark, so that he may not die. For I will appear in the cloud over the mercy seat. But in this way Aaron shall come into the holy place, with a bull from the herd for a sin offering, and a ram for a burnt offering. He shall put on the holy linen coat, and shall have the linen undergarment on his body. And he shall tie the linen sash around his waist, and wear the linen turban. These are the holy garments." I want to be very clear. The Zoroastrian holy underwear is directly stolen from the Jews in exile in Babylon. Zoroaster doesn't predate that. Zoroaster actually antedates the exile back. "He shall bathe his body in water and then put them on. And he shall take from the congregation of the people of Israel 2 male goats for a sin offering and 1 ram for a burnt offering." This is very interesting because the people of Israel are nowhere close to Jerusalem, where the temple is, when this is being said. Oh, this can't be the temple. This is Moses and Aaron. This is long before Solomon. Okay, so the holy place inside the veil must be the tabernacle. I'm not going to be doing etymologies until I have access to a peripheral that I can Google on. And God has made it very clear that I am not allowed to have any technology but this phone, but he has been decidedly merciful, and this phone's battery, since my battery charger, my external battery, was stolen, he's been very generous with this battery. So give thanks for me for that, and pray that this phone doesn't suddenly stop working because the goddess thinks she's funny, or my trickster decides that he's going to wake up. And please don't wake him up. He's already poofed my hat. Now, he tends to give me things that I want, but just, I don't want to fuck around with the magic while I'm actually out in the wilderness, because it gets dark at night, and I smoke enough weed during the day that I do get jumpy. That's why I didn't do I told you this already, but that's why I didn't do the spoopy weed. That's probably why I haven't done the spoopy weed today. The last time I read this book, I saw a UFO. So maybe I'm tempting fate reading it in October. But next time I get to the library, I'm in a closed off room where nothing's going to jump scare me ever, and I won't. Look, I jump scare easy as shit. We need to get back to this book. I'm spooking myself out with this book, and I confused myself at what time and place we were. Aaron's not allowed to come into the back part of the tent where they have the Ark of the Covenant. And the reason he's not allowed to do that is because Aaron, there's something about Aaron. I don't understand it, but Aaron is flawed in some way. Aaron's relationship with God is not the same as Moses. I don't understand it. I don't know what's going on with all of that. I tried to look into whether Aaron was even Moses' actual brother, and I got stymied by my life, the internet, so the god and the goddess. And so when he comes into the holy place, he has to be bathed in water, which during this time period, they're wandering the desert. So that's not easy. And then he has to wear the linen, which is made of flax, which would be a garment that they took with them out of Egypt. They don't have access to flax anymore. And so he has to have the linen undergarment and the linen cloak and the linen sash. And so you know what that looks like if you've ever seen if you've ever seen, well, you know what white linen looks like. I'm certain you know what like a white linen suit looks like. So if you just imagine a white linen robe and a white linen belt, and the undergarments are a pair of short pants, because that robe doesn't come past their knees, and that's actually where showing your ass comes from. Oh, he's showing his ass. It actually comes from this time period before the underwear. When they would climb up on their hill, if they were old and bent over, you could see their butts. And so he has to bring from Israel. This is interesting. If we think about what we're reading right now in the context of this was written in 250 BC, and this is not an oral legend from 1200 BC when the exile was happening, circa. Calling them all Israel only makes sense, because calling everyone Israel and not splitting the tribes into the 12 and then not the kingdoms, Judah and Israel. That's what you do when Israel's gone and they've all identified as Israel, because the Judahites didn't come back as Judahites. They came back as Israelis. Because they must have already been calling themselves the kingdom of Israel after Assyria obliterated Israel. Which means that using that, the people of Israel, is probably a subtle act of subversion. It's probably a subtle act of imperial subversion in the area. Continuing from Leviticus 16, chapter 16, verse 6. Aaron shall offer the bull as a sin offering for himself, and shall make atonement for himself and for his house. Then he shall take the 2 goats and set them before the Lord at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And Aaron shall cast lots over the 2 goats, 1 lot for the Lord and the other lot for Azazel. And now there's a footnote here. The meaning of Azazel is uncertain. Possibly the name of a place or of a demon, traditionally a scapegoat. Also verses 10 and 26. Oh, he shows up later. I understand. That was verse 8. Okay. I've looked into this. I've actually recorded podcasts about this that you can find on the internet. I think on YouTube, in fact. Azazel is who you think the devil is. The legend of Lucifer, as you understand it, should properly be called Azazel. Azazel and Samael led the rebellion that Enoch describes in the books of Enoch. He's the one who teaches humans iniquity in Genesis. Azazel is buried with Samael in the ground, but for whatever reason, Azazel's body is stuck in the ground, but his spirit roams the earth. So Azazel and Hasatan are different characters. Azazel is the source of all evil. You understand the difference in these 2 characters? Hasatan is the adversary. He's just what you set yourself against. Azazel is a fire in the night. Azazel is sudden infant death syndrome. Azazel is the angel of death that sweeps over Egypt. And so the scapegoat ceremony, there's a whole festival. What they would do is this. They would take 2 goats, a white goat and a black goat, and the white goat would be slain and eaten for sin, a sin offering, and then the black goat would be freed into the wilderness to feed Azazel in hopes that he would get enough scapegoats wandering around that he could just eat those. Well, if you're familiar with the demon Leonard, or if you're familiar with the statue that's outside of the Satanic Church, Satanic Temple, that demon's properly, that's not Baphomet. That demon is properly named Leonard, and if they use the proper name, they wouldn't be able to link themselves to John the Baptist in opposition of Jesus. I am certain that Layman, is that his name? I have the book. I'm going to read it eventually. I just have not consecrated. I haven't been baptized, so I haven't consecrated myself against Azazel and the way that this is describing. So I'm not prepared to confront the real evils, the evils that cling to you and fuck with your life. I have enough demons that fuck with my friends' lives that I don't need that mess. Continuing with verse 9, and Aaron shall present the goat on which the lot fell for the Lord and use it as a sin offering, as I've described to you. But the goat on which the lot fell for Azazel shall be presented alive before the Lord to make atonement over it, that it may be sent away into the wilderness to Azazel. What's happening here is in 250 BC, the Jewish people are having the same problem that the Greek people had in the 5th century, and that the Romans will have approaching the 1st century AD. Their rituals and their festivals and their ceremonies no longer match their folklore. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing, and they don't know why they're doing, and they don't know the names of these beings. Azazel, listen to this. Listen to this. Azazel shall be presented alive before Yahweh, to make atonement over it, that it may be sent away into the wilderness to Azazel. Az-az-el means something of God. In the same passage, El, the folklore god that everybody knows, in the same sentence with Yahweh, the Lord, a god whose name they're not allowed to pronounce, or hear, or see, the Tetragrammaton, a god they're not allowed to talk about, a God they're not allowed to think about, a God they're not allowed to approach. This is telling you that even Aaron wasn't allowed to approach the Lord. Aaron was allowed to give the Lord sin offerings, and Aaron was allowed to do the scapegoat ritual. But no one knew where that came from anymore. No one knew why they were doing that. They just had these priests out here, their asses showing. And that's what that means. He's just showing his ass. He doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know why he's doing this. He doesn't know the folklore any better than we do. He doesn't know the language any better than we do. And so the redactors had to come in and they had to go, okay, wait. Come here. El and Yahweh are the same thing. Okay? They're the same thing. Effectively, they're the same thing. Yeah. No, stop. Yes. El is going to appear in this story that we're writing for you here in Leviticus, and he's going to appear in the cloud. Yes, that's the El that you're familiar with from Exodus. That's the El that you're familiar with from the 11 stories and from the names that you give your children. Yes, we're familiar. We know that you're familiar with the lightning god El. Calm down. That guy also gave his names to a lot of demons. Super intelligent, never human entities, aka fallen angels. Okay? So he gave his name to a lot of those. And we no longer speak the language. We no longer know what Azaz means. Not us, you and me. The people that are being read Leviticus. This went away almost, like the things that they're describing here were characters and myths that already nobody understood. So when he's talking about this is he's gathering all of the people of Israel is exactly what I'm telling you. In 250, they just called everybody Israel. They just called all of it Israel, even though it had been Judah for hundreds of years. They just stopped calling themselves Judahites. They just started calling themselves Israelis. probably because the Greeks knew the Israelites. They were up north. The Anatolian, Ionian Greeks were Yahwist. They were Israelis. They knew that name. But we get Jew from Judahite. You understand? Jude, a Jude. So it's very interesting that they called themselves two things. It's almost confusing. And it shows the layers that you have to pull these books apart. This book is not from the oral tradition. This book is an invention to explain a lived ritual experience that no one understands. Very much like the Romans would feel about the imagination rituals in the first century. Why? This is weird. Continuing with 11. Aaron shall present the bull as a sin offering for himself, and shall make atonement for himself and for his house. He shall kill the bull as a sin offering for himself, and he shall take the censer full of coals of fire from the altar before the Lord, and 2 handfuls of sweet incense beaten small, and he shall bring it inside the veil, and put the incense on the fire before the Lord, that the cloud of the incense may cover the mercy seat that is over the testimony, so that he does not die. I don't know what the mercy seat is, and I don't know what the testimony is. I can't break that apart for you right now. That's not what I had prepared, and that's fine for me. But I'm going to tell you right now that using the specific word incense here means they're not doing burnt offerings anymore, which means that this is already after women were being kicked out of religion because of their fucking Asherah tree problem. Which means that if this incense has hashish, has cannabis in it, they don't want anybody knowing it. Continuing with 14. And he shall take some of the blood of the bull and sprinkle it with his finger on the front of the mercy seat on the east side, and in front of the mercy seat he shall sprinkle some of the blood with his finger 7 times. Then he shall kill the goat of the sin offering that is for the people, and bring its blood inside the veil, and do with its blood as he did with the blood of the bull, sprinkling it over the mercy seat and in front of the mercy seat. This is interesting. I think the house bull, the sacrifice of the house bull, that's ancient. Chedorlaomer, 7000 BC, did house bull ritual sacrifices. Every house has a bull head, has a what are those called? Has bull horns or whatever those are called. And bulls in the area of the Levant have been an important ritual. Chedorlaomer is up in Anatolia, where the Ionians were. Still south of the Hittites, if I have my geography correct. Bull jumping was a huge part of the female religion of the Minoans and the Mycenaeans. Bull sacrifices, I've told you this elsewhere, but bulls are a huge beast. They're a terrifying animal. And like we think, oh, no big deal today with killing these large animals because we overestimate guns. But the Spanish bullfighters, that goes back at least as far as the Mycenaeans who were bull jumping. Very much the same ritual. So that makes me think that the Levites, I believe that Aaron's house is the Levites, and that makes me think that the Levites have been Levantine for a long time, which means that the stuff with Aaron and Moses as brothers is subtle. The authors of Leviticus the authors of the Torah, the Pentateuch, are being subtle, very subtle, by calling them brothers, but then Aaron has to do all of this for his entire house, for the entire tribe of Levi. That means that the authors of the Torah were also leaning into the iniquities of the Levites that have been in all of these books as far back as the Bronze Age. So this means that what they have is good records of their sins, but what they don't have is good records of their culture heroes. And by 250 BC, you're 500 years after Homer. If you're competing with Greeks at this point, which sounds like you're competing with Greeks, you're in a position where you're doing what I'm doing. You have to win on personality and message over pomp and circumstance, because like the Greeks had an elaborate and developed theater system. The Deus Ex Machina, the God in the machine, literally they had cranes and other complex machines for allowing things like like Cupid to fly, or they had another one that would make a booming voice come from backstage, and that's the God in the machine. They would do the voice of the God, Deus, Zeus, El, Yahweh. And so if you're competing with that, what you have to win on is personality. No one ever talks about these books like that. I've never heard anybody point these things out. That's why I'm going to run long on this one as well. Continuing at 16, verse 16 of chapter 16. Thus he shall make atonement for the holy place, because of the uncleanness of the people of Israel, and because of their transgressions, all their sins. And so he shall do for the tent of meeting, which dwells with them in the midst of their uncleanness. Uncleanness is, no one may be in the tent of meeting from the time he enters to make atonement in the holy place until he comes out and has made atonement for himself and for his house and for all the assembly of Israel. Okay, so the reason you can't go into the tent of assembly is because that's where food and drink and the kind of gossipy chatter that Paul hated takes place. And so the reason you can't go in there is for the same reason that Paul didn't want women talking in church. You can talk around the dinner table. You can talk when the fun wine and bread have come out. This is serious time. This is time to reflect on how we could be better, not to point the finger at how everybody but you is bad. And so you don't go in while he's doing all these things, because you're going to eat these animals. These are big animals. For the most part, people did not consume. You don't need to consume the calories that you consume, even wandering the desert. And so while this is important, actually. This is an important life lesson that you should take away from me, in fact. While you're waiting on your meal in a restaurant, you should be giving thanks for the restaurant existing. You should be spending time thinking about the effort that's going in to make your food and the effort that went into making the dining establishment attractive to be in. One of the things that I do when I leave this McDonald's and I talk to anybody is I talk about how attractive it is to be inside and how efficient, in fact, the people that run that, they only open one register. They have to. They only need to open one because they're doing a great job. The kids that run that are doing a fantastic job. And they're getting better. They're not treated well by their customers, but that's what I'm saying. When you're waiting in line and you've got your whole life going on, you do need to stop and take the time before you go to the table of assembly to give thanks to God that you have a table to assemble around, that there is someone out there working to make sure that even though you are a wretched sinner, even though you are a thief and a liar and a murderer, a blasphemer, you bear false witness against your neighbor, you break all of the 10 Commandments, you are adulterous, all of it. All of it. So am I. But taking the time to appreciate that your food and the animal that went to make your food, or the plants that went to make your food, sacrificed for you, is called reciprocation. Just taking the time to be mindful and to remember that these people are working as hard as they can for you. And sure, if they could be better, do you know how you make them be better? You give them a big smile and a big thank you and tell them to have a good day, even though it was hard. You smile at the people that are working back there while you're waiting for your food, even if they can't help you. You don't glare at them, you don't tap your foot, you don't get all impatient like this. Acting like that is exactly why one of the goats is sent out into the desert. If you want it so bad, go get it your fucking self. Thank you for being here. We will return in part 15 with Leviticus chapter 16, verse 16. Have a good day. Make sure to just tell someone thank you today, and you will be the winner.